Hello, hello. Another late night here. I'm gonna just wait for a few people to join another impromptu live. But yeah, I'm excited about tonight's topic. So yeah, okay, looks like we have some people hopping on. So tonight topics: why more women should close their legs. um, yeah, why more women should close their legs. I have a lot to say about a lot to say about this topic. If you listen to my content before, then you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of the sex positive movement. I'm not the biggest fan of what we see positioned as modern female sexuality because I think it's damaging and because I think it tells lies. So, um, most women today, they're not going to hear this. They're not going to hear, hey, you should close your legs. They're not going to hear, hey, you should probably rethink having so many sexual partners. You should rethink just how much sex you're having altogether. You're not going to hear this. I know that I'm probably very much the unpopular opinion, and I'm okay with that because, like I said, when it comes to this particular area or this particular subject, I think there's a lot of damage, and I don't want to be like everyone else. I don't want to be popular, or I don't want to be, just how everyone else is doing it because I think how a lot of other people are doing it is actually damaging. But I think the main reason, well, there's many reasons. So I'll just start. One one of the primary issues I have with modern female sexuality, especially in the Black community, is how it creates this fantasy world where women can do whatever they want and act however they want and have as many sexual partners as they desire and have as much sex as they desire and go around and be free and be free and be free and exist in this world as if there's no repercussions. And that's how it's positioned almost all the time. That's how it's positioned. It's always positioned as, oh, woman, you can have this, you can have that, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have your career, you can have your sex partners, you can have different men to give you different things. You can have as many partners as you want, and there's going to be zero repercussions. And oftentimes that's how it's told to us. And there used to be a time that when a woman was promiscuous, there used to be a time where you would kind of hide that behavior. You would hide that behavior. For example, I remember my great grandma. she was a different era, completely different era, and I was blessed to be able to know her. She passed away, I think, when I was around 12 or 13. But my memories of her are very fond, and she made an impression in me in very many ways. And I just remember there was like, I was in a room with her, and something happened where I think she's talking to my mom, and she's wanting to mention sex, and she looks over to me, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, she's in this room. I can't say it." And she kind of like she leans over my mom and like whispers in her ear, like she doesn't want to say it out loud because I'm in the room and she doesn't want to tape my ears. I'm like 12 or 13, and I look back at that and I'm laughing because she was in this era where it was like there's just certain things you kept private. There's just certain things that you did, you and your husband, you and your spouse within a certain context. There was just very clear cultural boundaries, and I look back on that and I think it's funny. And fast forward to today, and I look at how things are, and I'm like, man, she would just she would have been like a fish out of water if she'd have seen how things have progressed or digressed. But my point is, there used to be a time when if a woman was promiscuous, she wasn't necessarily going around and flaunting that everywhere because that wasn't seen as a value. But now we do live in a society where somehow or supposedly this is supposed to be a good thing. And this is supposed to be freedom, this is supposed to be liberation for women. And while I totally agree that a woman and a man, for that matter, should have the freedom to do whatever they want with their body. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely, I think, right. What I don't like is how um, how what I believe to be destructive and irresponsible behavior is pushed. It's like it's almost shoved down your throat. It's almost to the point to where like if you're not going out and exploring and having as many sexual partners, if you're not having, free sex, or if you're not going and living your hot girl summer every weekend, like if you're not doing that, then it's almost like, well, what's wrong with you? You're behind the times. Like you're missing out, or you're this, you're X, Y, and Z. And again, what no one ever wants to talk about is the repercussions. No one ever wants to talk about that. There's never really a focus on, hey, well, yeah, okay, you could have sex, but you could also get pregnant, right? Or okay, even if you do get pregnant, of course there's plan B and there's all these other things. But there's a lot of women who they'll go around and they'll be promiscuous and they'll have all these situations. But if they get pregnant, there's an aspect of them that just feels like they feel guilty. They would feel guilty for the aspect of even aborting a baby. And so they feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like, man, I want to have fun. I did X, Y, and Z, and now I'm pregnant. And it's like, dang, I don't want this, but I don't feel like I maybe have the guts to actually give this child up. And there's women who get stuck on that, scenario. Or there's women, they go through the abortion totally and completely and they get rid of it. And I've met these women, and 5, 10, 15 years later, the guilt, the weight of the guilt still weighs on them for a decision that happened to them when they were 18. And now here they are, 28, 30, 38, thinking about that baby, still wondering what would have happened. Those are real psychological implications. Those are real implications of what can happen. And see, and here's the thing. Yeah, of course, yeah, men, when they sleep around and they can get pregnant too. So it's not to act as if there aren't repercussions for men. But we know biologically, a man can have sex 365 days a week and he's not gonna have to worry about carrying a baby in his belly for 9 months. So there's not that immediate sense of I guess, repercussions. But for women, there very much is a repercussion. And so just if we start there, we obviously know you have sex, there is a big, possibility of getting pregnant. That's just obvious. And so any well-meaning adult knows that. But again, the problem that I have, the problem that I have with this free modern have as much sex as you want kind of mindset that many women have taken on is that again, it creates a lot of, I think, irresponsible activity that leads to probably a lot of pregnancies that maybe were not intended. And this is probably one of many reasons that, we see more and more single parent households, because we're promoting this kind of behavior that, like I said, I do not think is healthy. Secondly, and I've mentioned this before, if a woman desires to ever be a wife, or if a woman desires to ever, settle down and have a family, she needs to know that that the more sex that she has, the more partners she has, the higher her body count is, the less desirable she's going to be as a wife to a husband. And I hate to say it, you don't really hear this. You don't hear this really at all. You hear women, you can do this, you can secure your bag. If men can do it, therefore women can do it. And that's the culture we're in. We're in this culture where it's like this silly competition where it's women against men. And we see that in all aspects. And I think, that's one of the primary examples. It's like, oh, well, men historically have been the ones to go around and have all the sex and, the brothels and all these different things were for men. And so now we live in an era where women are like, well, hell, if men did it, I should be able to do it, And so there's this push to be the same as men. But again, I'm like, we're not the same as men. We're not even biologically, we are not created the same. You're not created the same. A man cannot get pregnant, right? A woman can get pregnant. So like, we just start there. Secondly, again, when it comes to a relationship, and I don't really know what it is or why, but I can say even anecdotally in my life, the more women want a particular man, the more even sometimes sexual partners or sexual access a man has had sometimes it seems like the more desirable that man becomes. I don't know why. I mean, we can even look at the Derek Jackson case, right? Example where it's like he was sleeping around with all these women, and even now after the fact, there's still women who probably follow him and who would happily sleep with him just because, just his aura. There's women who want him, and somehow like women wanting him validates the fact that like he's a good guy. And so I feel like in some way, shape, or form, the more partners a man has, it's in some weird toxic way, sometimes I can make more women like him. But it doesn't, I don't necessarily see that reflected the opposite way. I don't see a woman having more and more and more sexual partners and then men being like, oh yeah, let me sign me up for her. Yes, she's had a, wow, she's at 100 body count. Yay. Like that's wifey over there. Like I just don't see that. Not to say, there aren't guys out there who think like that. Maybe there are, but just majority from what I've understand and what I've seen, there's a difference between a pump and dump, for lack of a better term, or a wife. And I think it's important that a young girl needs to know, or a woman that's coming of age needs to know that if I want to actually be a wife one day, or if my desire is to settle down and have a family, how I behave in my teens and in my 20s, it could potentially set the course for the rest of my life. It can set the course for the rest of my life. And that's not what we hear. That's never talked about. The repercussions of a young girl sleeping around in her teens and her 20s, that's never, ever, ever talked about. See, and here's the thing. I'm not one to say that like, oh, men, women don't ever sleep around and men, you can do it. And I'm not gonna be a hypocrite. I think there's challenges and there's problems on both ends when men sleep around a lot and women sleep around a lot. So I'm no way, shape, or form being like, oh guys, you can do whatever. And women, you have to act like nuns. Like that's not what I'm saying. But what I will say is that the repercussions, I think, are stronger on different levels, not only just physically, right? Obviously, if a woman gets pregnant, she's affected a lot more than a man. Right? Then we think about the way this impacts a woman and her ability to eventually marry. Not to say that single mothers can't marry. I know plenty of single mothers who have married and who are, in good relationships, but it will impact your ability to find a guy. If you're young and you're single, you don't have kids versus, maybe a few years older and you have a few kids and a baby daddy or two. Yeah, that's definitely going to affect the way you are in the sexual marketplace. Whereas for men, it's different. I just feel like for men, they can have a kid or two, but as long as they have the resources necessary to maintain that kid and the woman, it does not seem to be as much as a deterrent. I mean, of course, I know women who would not want to date a guy with kids, but I don't think the standards are equal. I think women end up being negatively impacted more if they're a single mother trying to be in a relationship with a guy versus the other way around. And I don't know why it's like that. I didn't create the rules, but I mean, there's a reason you have say no to baby mothers, say no to baby mamas. Like you have entire groups who are literally like, say no to baby mamas, say no to single mothers. Like they're entire groups that are literally positioned around this idea that like, she has a kid, she has a baby, I want nothing to do with her. And that could be considered unfair. Women could say, hey, that's unfair because men do it too. Yeah, it is. But I didn't create the rules, And so I think it needs to be said that, again, a woman needs to know, yeah, okay, if you're going to go, if you don't want to close your legs, right. And if you want to go and be free and be sexually free and have as many experiences as possible, you need to actually know, okay, what could this mean for you in the future? What could this mean after you get out of high school or college? How could this impact you? How could this impact your ability to maybe actually find a man of value or find a husband? I'm not talking about an F-boy, because if you're sexually loose, then any guy will sleep with you. I mean, there's guys out there who will sleep with women that they're not even attracted to just because she's a woman, So there's a lot of guys out there who they won't say no to free sex. If it's there, they'll take it, but it doesn't mean they want to actually wife you up. And I think a woman needs to know, how are you branding yourself now? How are you presenting yourself? If you actually do desire to be a wife, how is that kind of behavior helping or preparing you to get to that point? Okay, looks like I have some comments coming in. 1 second. Yeah, a single father can still make money and become valuable. Absolutely. Women still want Drake. He has a kid. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, late night stream. Yeah, I'm definitely having late night stream here. Yeah, if you sleep around, you're easy. Yeah, I've heard that. And there is definitely a double standard. Yeah, and in part for a good reason. Yeah, no, there is definitely a double standard. And I think some of this I think is biology. I think it's just the way men and women are we're created differently. We are attracted to different things, and I think the sooner we can actually recognize that and embrace that, and versus competing, I think we'll actually be a lot better off. And then of course, yeah, having just free, just and discipline sex, it creates unwanted pregnancies as well as the psychological effects, baggage of promiscuity. 100%. 100%. So for some of you, it looks like some of you guys are just tuning on now. I'm talking about why I think women should close their legs. Honestly. And I'm focusing on women. This isn't to say that I don't believe that, men should also operate with sexual discipline. I totally do. But I'm wanting to focus on women. One, because I am one. Two, because most women today won't hear this. Most women today are not going to hear a message that says, hey, you probably should reconsider all the things you've heard up to this point. And there's actually value to being sexually pure. And there's actually value to you not going around and just slinging and just throwing your thing and throwing your walk wherever you can. And so this is precisely why I want to talk about this, because this is not what's being heard. This is not what's being promoted. It's not what's being taught. And so, and just side note, if you guys like this content, please like, share, tag people. You can also find me on CASHAPP, ChezCharde, also on VENMO. And as always, if you guys have any other just ideas or topics you would like me to cover off, please feel free to let me know, because I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, so just to kind of get back into the topic. So I was saying, first reason I do not like the idea of sex positive is because from what I've heard, I think it just pretty much sells a fantasy. And the fantasy is that you can have basically as much sex as possible and there's no to little repercussion. So that's something that I don't like. Second is that it does not prepare women for the reality of what happens and what likely will happen if you choose to go that route. So I mentioned again, if a woman decides, that she's like, yeah, I want to have my hot girl summer. I'm going off to college. I want to have fun. She decides to do that. Okay, great. She needs to know that if her desires actually get married later on, she needs to know that that's going to negatively impact her. That especially if she gets pregnant, it'll likely negatively impact her. And then what also happens, right? Obviously, the more sexual partners you have, the more experiences you have, then you start to create an appetite. You start to create this appetite. And if you've had any experiences with F-boys, which many women in college have, especially if they're going with the guys with swag, they're going with the guys that most women like, because somehow the guys that other women like tend to be more attractive for some reason. I mean, there's there's all these things, but yeah, if the more experiences you have with men, and especially with F-boys, then it can create this unhealthy appetite. It can create this expectation. And then now if you really do meet a guy who could really be good husband material or really be just good material, just for a partner in general, now you don't even really know how to value him, because maybe now you are comparing him to an F-boy from a few years ago in college, or from this fling you had over there where that guy had zero intention of actually wifing you up, had zero intention of ever wanting to do anything with you long term, but all you're thinking about is that sexual experience. And so I think another big issue is, you're thinking about the emotional baggage that you have when you have more partners. You're thinking about the psychological baggage. And then now you have all this comparison. And each person that you meet, you are comparing with these experiences or with these flings that they were just that. Their experiences, they were flings, but there wasn't necessarily any long-term value associated with it. And how do you compare flings? How do you compare that to a long enduring relationship? You really don't, and you really can't. And I think this kind of behavior especially becomes damaging to women who want to be wives because, again, now they have all this experience. They have all this sexual experience. They have all this entire record playing in their head sometimes. And it can sometimes make them unsatisfied with what's out there, unsatisfied with who's available, unsatisfied with the good guys that may actually be great husbands, who may actually be great fathers. And I think that could be a problem. And then also, and then that can start to lead to now you're having unrealistic expectations. When you were 18, you just wanted a guy who would love you and would be nice. And then now, you get 25 and you had sexual experiences, and now you want him to be, now he has to be at least 6'4". He has to have these have a six-pack abs, have 6 inches, have 6 figures. Then when you get to where you're 30, now he has to have a big house, and sometimes it's like, these more experiences, sometimes it's like it can create a longer list, just more things. Just, okay, now the guy has to do this, now he has to do that. And with each partner, with each individual, it's just one more thing to add for another man to live up to. And how will that ever work? How will that ever work? And yes, I think it can create discontent. It can create discontent. And so, notwithstanding the fact that, again, a woman, sure, there's a possibility of her getting pregnant. And even if she gets pregnant, plan B, okay, let's say she gets plan B, she aborts the baby. Now you're having to deal with the psychological baggage. Because everyone that I've met, that I've known who has actually confessed to aborting a child, because there's some women who have aborted, a child, and they feel so ashamed, they don't even talk about it, they won't even confess it. But those women who have confessed it, the shame and the guilt, it is an ever-present reality, and some of them have a very hard time getting over it. So, there's that issue, right? And then secondly, again, if you want to be a wife and you're having a whole lot of sex and you're becoming community property, for lack of a better term, guys are looking at you, and they may, they'll sleep with you, and they may even take you on a date or two just so you guys can end up in bed. But they're not going to want to wife you up. Most of them aren't. And of course, we have the examples, right, of like the Ciara, and then we have like the Laura Harvey, and we have different examples of movie stars, right, who are kind of with these bad boys, who are maybe behaving in a way that, may be questionable to mainstream media, and then they end up with this, like, the good guy, and it can kind of create this image of like, oh, see, hey, I can have my hot girl summer. I can kind of mess around with the F boys or with the bad boys, and then end up with a good guy. And, those kinds of stories, while they can maybe be cute, most women don't have those results because most women aren't superstars. Most women don't get paid to look pretty and look beautiful. And most women don't necessarily have the kind of privilege that those two women that I described have, because they're not in like the hyper elite, and they're not in Hollywood. And in Hollywood, the way they do things is totally and completely different than the way your average person does things. So again, unlike what we may see in media, and unlike what we may see women or superstars do, your average woman cannot act like a Ciara and then end up with a Russell Wilson. Or they can't act like a Megan Good and end up with Devon Franklin. I think it's his name. I'm drawing a blank. But they can't do that. And I want to use those examples because I know there will be women who push back and be like, oh, well, see, well, she did it. And I'm like, first of all, those are all just beautiful, drop dead gorgeous women who get paid to look good. And they're movie stars, or at least they're connected to the hyper elite. And many of us are not. So therefore, we cannot expect to have the result of the hyper elite, because they abide by a different set of rules. So yeah. So like I said, a woman starts to act like that. The more and the more she acts like that, a lot of guys are looking at her like, okay, yeah, that's community property. I'll have at her, but I'm probably not going to want to wife her up. And that can become a big challenge, and it can become a big issue if a woman actually does desire to be a wife one day. And then on top of that, and that brings me to another point. So if you're spending so many of your young years, you know what I mean, your teens and maybe even your 20s, even some women in their 30s, trying to pursue your next sexual escapade, how can you ever be prepared to be a wife or to be a mother? How do you even have time to do that? How do you even have time to cultivate those qualities? And of course, in an ideal scenario, those qualities would be cultivated as a young girl. You're growing up, looking at your parents, looking at how your mom and your, dad interact. In an ideal situation, that would happen, right? But many of us don't live in an ideal situation, and sometimes we're learning into our 20s, even our 30s sometimes. Okay, what does this mean to really be a good wife? What does this mean to actually be a productive woman? You know what I mean? What does it mean to be a blessing or to be an asset to the man in my life and to the children that I want to bear? And those are all things I think worth pursuing and worth wanting to become. But again, if you're kind of chasing the hot girl summer all the time, and if you're in and out of someone's bed, it's really hard for you to be able to focus on that. And I think that's another issue that I have, is that you can, if you're, it's really hard. It's, I think, nearly impossible to want to be sexually free and want to be sexually promiscuous and to have this entire hot girl summer, and then also have the qualities that are really necessary to raise a productive and a healthy family long term. Not to say you can raise a family, you can, but as far as them being healthy and productive and psychologically well, I'm like, how can both coincide? Because generally speaking, again, when you are living that kind of lifestyle and you are so committed to being in and out of a person's bed and just living out every sexual fantasy, the level of emotional and psychological chaos that comes along with that is unfounded. It's so high. And while I will say that this was not my personal experience, right? Because, I chose really early on, like, hey, I'm not going to go this route. I'm not going to do the whole sexual freedom liberation thing. Like, I just chose early on, like, I just was not feeling that. I was not about that life. I have plenty of friends and plenty of acquaintances who did. And the stories that they tell are not worth repeating. And some of the mistakes and some of the repercussions as a result of it are also not worth repeating. And so while I can't say I'm speaking from experience and saying like, oh, well, I did, I spent my 20 years doing X, Y, and Z, and now I'm coming out of it. It's like, no, I didn't do that by the grace of God. And I don't regret it, because for those who did, for those who I walk with who did do that, I don't desire their life. I don't desire those repercussions. Nothing about what they have looks even remotely desirable to me, because I understand the psychological chaos. I've talked to some of these women and know how broken they are or confused that they are. And then how difficult it is to have these sexual urges and not be able to live it out, or they need to live it out. And so they just pick any old thing just to have a fun night, and then crap, that leads to a bad toxic situationship. Like, those situations are real. Situations are real. And so it's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And no one wants to talk about the very real psychological repercussions that come with a woman sleeping around over and over and over and over again and over again. And I absolutely hate that this is promoted on the media all the time, especially Black women. It's especially Black and brown women that we see presented as this Jezebel, sexually like free animal. It's almost always Black women. We don't really see other cultures doing this. I don't see this promoted among other cultures. And please, if you guys are listening, be sure to hit the like buttons, share, comment. As I mentioned before, you can find me on my Cash App, ChezCharde, or Venmo, ChezCharde. If you guys want to hear more content like this, please let me know. Feel free to send me just any ideas. Thank you so much for listening in. Appreciate you guys. But as I was saying before, we don't really see this as much even promoted in other communities. I don't see Chinese women, being promoted on media like this. You don't really see that as much for like the Indian culture. You don't really see that for the Jewish culture, but it is most certainly Black women, especially Black and brown women, especially, who are at the forefront doing the hoeing and the skoing. It's the Black women we see all the time going in restaurants, twerking in a restaurant, in a business environment, acting like it's no big deal. It's like twerking has like become the Black woman's mating call or something. Like I don't understand it, and I don't really like it. It's okay. I'm getting some more comments in. Yeah, it's arranged marriages. You know what's so funny? You know what's so funny? I've talked to this before about a few people, and how it's made, although arranged marriages maybe was not the most romantic, quote unquote, it's certainly, I think, made for a better society. It's certainly made for stronger cultures. And what we have going on today, this hookup culture, is not it. It is not, fam. Like it's just not it, fam. Like I don't think it's really, I don't think it's helping nobody. I really don't. So I'm like, arranged marriages, I mean, man, I think they were onto something, because people were doing that for hundreds of thousands of years and were cool. And then now in this modern context, we just decide to lose our mind and just act like there are no standards. And here we are. Here we are. Yeah, and once a woman gets it, it's hard to stop, especially if it was good. Yeah, and that's real. No, that's a real thing. Like once a woman gets a taste, then it's like it is hard for them to stop, even if they want to turn off that hoe gene. If they want to, it can be hard, and that's assuming a woman goes through that phases and isn't burned, right? Doesn't get a baby daddy or two or three, or sometimes even four, right? And like I said, you're talking the psychological trauma, you're talking the abuse, and then even if a woman goes through the whole phase, doesn't get pregnant, don't get no STD, you know what I mean? She comes out cool. She psychologically seems to be okay, which I don't even know if that's possible, but she seems to be okay, like decent. What expectations is she gonna have? If she's not ready to settle down, what kind of expectations is she gonna bring into the relationship? Is she now expecting her husband to like be some 6-7 figure outstanding citizen, but like be a porno star, like in the bedroom? Like what is she expecting? Is she wanting like an F-boy and a pastor and a saint and a businessman all at the same time? Like what? Like now, what expectations happen the more partners that you have? And I think that becomes a problem. So, okay, looks like I got some comments. So yes, but you are judgmental if you dare to show concern. You're right. No, you're absolutely right. And I've said this in previous videos. I think that there are some women who they've kind of gotten sucked into the matrix, or sucked into this lie that many of us have heard, that it's okay to do this, to do that. And maybe they don't have parental guidance, or maybe their mom act a certain way, or the auntie act a certain way, or whatever. Or they see other friends doing it, so they feel like, okay, well, if other people are doing it, I should do it. So they go and they live this lifestyle, and they have their hot girl summers year after year after year, and they start to kind of feel bad about themselves if they're being honest. Some of them start to feel kind of dirty. But instead of being like, man, like I feel kind of trashy, like I feel like this is not good, instead of actually owning that, they would rather move the metric. They'd rather be like, okay, well, hoe used to be a thing, but now, therefore, hoe doesn't mean anything. Like, I actually remember watching a video on this not too long ago, and it was a girl being like, she was talking about how she'd had many, many sexual partners, and I think had prostituted herself in multiple times, and how she was like, at first she said she felt bad about it. She kind of felt bad, but then she was like, she came to her own revelation, and she was like, well, hoe, that's just a social construct, and so hoe doesn't even really mean anything unless you give it meaning, and so I don't even think hoe should be used. And I'm like, wait, what? So what you're saying is that you felt bad about acting how you think, or acting like a hoe, for lack of a better term, or acting like promiscuous, and instead of you being like, man, I felt bad for acting promiscuous, maybe I should stop because this behavior is making me feel bad, you now want to actually move the bar. You want to say, you know what? I don't want to feel bad anymore. So instead of me stopping, I'd rather just say that this shouldn't be a standard. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Oh man. And nothing but bodies and trauma, only thing a woman can bring is sex. Yeah, no, and it becomes trauma. The way Black women are promoted, the way they present themselves, and the type of behavior they co-sign make it almost impossible to find them attractive for a family-oriented man. Right, and I think that's a big issue. It's the way many of us, it's the message that's being promoted. And it shouldn't be the TVs that are raising us. It shouldn't be the videos, the music videos or the movies raising us. It shouldn't be. But for some kids and for some generations, it really is, and that's the only examples they see, unfortunately. And there's a market. There is a market off of you know hypersexualizing women and promoting this garbage, and that's why it continues. I think that's why it continues. Um, and it says, yeah, when they hit the wall, they want a simp to come save them. Well, another thing I've noticed. So another thing I've noticed. And again, thank you all of you guys who are listening. Please like, share, comment, tag. You can find me on ChezCharde on Cash App and also on Venmo. And then again, if you have any content you'd like to hear me talk about, please let me know. Always feel free to hit me up. I'd love to hear from you. But I think another thing that I've learned from women who have, gone through this phase. There's two things. There's one who are in this phase or kind of in this part of their life, and they're not ready to get out of it. And so they kind of go back and forth in and out of situationships, in and out of bed, and they're just psychologically unstable. There's always some big drama, something going on that's draining their life and keeping them from really being able to actually move forward with them being productive. And so that's what I've seen. I've seen just utter chaos in their personal life, and then that transition into their professional and their psychological well-being. So there's that woman who's kind of stuck in that chaos. And there's another woman that I know who, okay, they did that thing, maybe they did the whole phase and it just drained them, or they did the whole phase and kind of did the whole sugar daddy thing, and then they just kind of got bored and they're like, okay, I want to settle down. Or they did the whole phase and they got knocked up a few times and like, crap, I don't want to get pregnant anymore. Either way, they come to this point where they recognize, I'm done being sexually promiscuous. I don't want to live this lifestyle anymore. And then, okay, I become a born again virgin, or I become celibate. And here's the thing, I have nothing wrong with that. I think people make mistakes. People do things and they look back and they're like, man, I shouldn't have done that. I think there definitely needs to be a room for growth. There needs to be a room for a person to evolve and be like, yeah, I didn't get it all right. None of us get it all right. I'll probably look back at my life 10 years from now and be like, man, like I missed it there. I think that's a part of growth and self-evolution. But the issue, again, I think with the born again version thing is, I think there are some women who are actually genuine. They're genuine and they get to a point and they're like, man, that was bad and I genuinely want to do better. And I think there's some people who just kind of use that as a result, or use it as an excuse to either because they can't get the man that they want. And they're like, okay, well, if I can't get what I want, instead of me saying these men that I want don't want me back, they're just going to use, oh, well, I'm choosing to be celibate. Or they use it as an excuse to be like, okay, well, now I'm going to be celibate. Now, therefore, I deserve even better. I deserve even better because now I'm abstaining. Now I'm operating with restraint. And before I wanted a 6-figure, now I want a 7-figure. And sometimes I think even this whole idea of a born again virgin can bring a sense of entitlement, or a woman can hide behind it. And I'm not saying this happens all the time. Like I said, there are women that I know where they are truly genuine and like, you know what, I'm doing this for spiritual reasons. I'm doing this because I want to honor God, and I want to just repent, or I want to turn from this way that I was living and do better. And so I do know women who have done that. And I also know very many women where it's like, they're using that just as a way to try to move forward. They're just trying to manipulate their way into a better situation. And it doesn't work like that. The way we act in our teens, in our 20s, in our younger years, it does impact us. It does impact us. And so I think that is something, that's something that really, really needs to be addressed. I think, at the end of the day, a woman is going to do what she wants to do, and she's going to act however she wants to act. And that's her right. We live in a free country. But I think what needs to happen, especially, young girls, teens, women entering in their 20s, I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a true, pure, honest conversation of, hey, here are the benefits of living sexually disciplined and living sexually pure. Here are the supposed benefits of living sexually free. Here are the downside of here's the downside here, here's the downside there. Like I think there actually needs to be a very, very, very clear conversation, a clear understanding of, hey, you have got to know what you are getting yourself into. My personal opinion, and the way that I chose to live, and a lot of this has to go with because of my spiritual background and my spiritual upbringing, where I said, hey, I'm going to abstain from certain things. I'm going to wait till I get married. This is partially for spiritual reasons, for as an act of worship to God, and also because I think it's going to be easier for me to navigate and be a little bit more clear-headed. And that saved me from a lot of just what could have been bad situations. It saved me from a lot of bad situations. Now, I do know that there are some people where they take it too far, and you have some hyper-religious circles where it almost becomes like sex negative, and they don't even talk to young girls about sex at all. And, and it's almost as if like sex is a bad word. And I'm talking specifically those who find themselves in church or hyper-religious circles. And I think that can be damaging too, because you don't want to live up in an environment where it's like, okay, sex is demonized, and now having any sexual desire is negative, and you literally create this sex negative environment to now, if the girl or the child does go off to college, they just have this like nutty reaction, or this like gut knee reaction or whatever, and they just go wild. They go crazy wild because they weren't prepared. And so I don't think that's healthy either. I don't think it's healthy to have an environment where it's like, just there's so sexual freedom and there's no restraint, but also to a point where it's so strict and sex is like a bad word, to where now a person enters as an adult and it's like sex negative. Because I've also seen that, and I think that can also be just as damaging. I don't think it's as common. I don't think it's as common today, but certainly in religious and very, very strict Orthodox religious settings, it can be, and that can be just as bad. Yes, okay, see some comments. So some Christians definitely hide behind it to avoid accountability. I definitely agree. If I want a virgin, I can take a trip to Ethiopia or Kenya to find someone who's actually a virgin. That's true. I mean, they do exist out here in America, but it's it's almost like an endangered species. It's a very, very, very small amount. You might be better off going to a developing country. I agree. True. Thank you for sharing this information. A woman cannot have a casual sex partner and then along for a husband. I agree. I think the two are directly opposed. Women have too much rights here than men. I also honestly don't want to be with a virgin, but I also don't want a reformed hoe with emotional and psychological baggage. Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. How about the new trending regarding friends with benefits? Who lose in the end? I say the woman hands down loses. Why do women agree to something like this? Good question. Friends with benefits. Yeah, I think. First of all, I think that's just bad idea. I'm like, friends with benefits. Why not actually just get in a relationship? Why not actually just get with somebody who wants to be with you? The whole situationship thing to me is so draining. And I think a lot of time that has more to do, it has a lot more to do with the way that individual values his or herself to stay in a situation that's not really secure, or that's kind of like iffy-any. Because from what I understand, a guy pretty much knows early on whether or not he wants to be with you. Like, and I think sometimes, I mean, females, it could be argued that they friend zone you earlier on too. But I think especially men, like, they probably know pretty early on whether or not, like, yeah, you're wife material, or you're just kind of like a pump and dump, or hit it and quit it. Like it's, I think that's pretty clear. So I'm thinking, as a female, like, why like, for what reason? I honestly, I personally never really understood. I never understood this, the benefit of doing that, unless you exist in a context where you are convinced and you are dedicated to living out the fact that women can do absolutely everything that men can do and have no repercussions. And I do think that there are women out there who that's like that's a mission that they have, to prove that they can do everything that men can do, that they can literally do it. And that means to take on roles that may historically be considered more male, or may historically be considered more masculine, like for better or for worse. Friends with benefits is basically enhanced. Yeah, I agree there. It's two people selling themselves short. Yeah, I agree. I think when you're in a situationship, like that's just that can be draining. Even I've been in like, uh, or I could say I've seen like I've had I guess I've had friends that I've been with. I don't want to say counsel, but it's like sometimes it ends up that I'm like they're just pouring their heart on me, and I'm kind of like seeing from a third party perspective this situation play out in real life form, and I'm like I'm being drained watching this. I'm looking at this and I'm like this is so I'm like I'm getting tired, I'm getting overwhelmed. Like just be in something or not be in something. But this whole iffy Annie, like again, it's a time suck. And if your purpose as a woman is to get wifed up, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is not to prolong it in getting in friends and benefits, getting in and out of bed, increasing your your sexual experience. And I think there's this ideology that exists out there of women who say, I have more experience, so therefore I deserve more. I deserve a better partner because I have more experience. And I think it's a fallacy. I think it's a fallacy because I'm like, this isn't a job. You're not applying like you're not a corporation where you're applying to get into a position that requires 5 to 7 years of marketing experience or 5 to 7 years of sales. It's a lot different in the context of a relationship. And while of course, depending on where a person is at, they may want somebody who's a little bit more seasoned or has a little bit more life or wisdom or understanding. Um, I I don't really know anybody that is like, yes, sign me up to be with a hoe and all of these psychological ramifications that come with it. Again, of course, we know of a few movie stars and a few basketball stars who have chosen to do that. But I think the vast majority of us do not necessarily see promiscuity as a wifely long term um, characteristic that we desire. Like our characters we want to see in a partner to begin with. Um, okay, so how did you get past the stress of society by not following to have body counts? Was it easy for you, and have you almost slipped once? Is that a fair question? No, that's a fair question. I can say. So I grew up more like in a sex negative, for lack of a better term, a sex negative background. I wouldn't. I would say I think there's a downside to that. I think there certainly needs to be a place that exists where like you can talk about sex, you can talk about these different things, and it not be so demonized. Because for me, growing up, it very much was. But I think there was apart from that toxic side of I guess like the sex negative. For me, the primary thing that sustained me was truly me making a commitment early on that I wanted to honor God, and that there were certain things I just believed I felt convicted in my heart that was what I was supposed to do, and no one else could really convince me of it. It was nothing else that someone else didn't have to like drill that in my consciousness. It was a decision that I made early on, and it was because my heart had been touched by God, and I felt like because of this is a way that I want to honor Him as a woman, and this is a way that I want to live my life moving forward. And so, I can honestly say that is what sustained me. And yeah, there are definitely opportunities. There are opportunities with men or what can be considered high value men or high earners or just really really good looking. And like there were opportunities for sure, but I think for me when I weighed like what was really important to me and who my commitment was to, and I'm like, okay, my commitment is to God first, or my commitment is to this vow that I made. That just for me that was like always just number one. And so I go on to say that's kind of what helped me navigate. And I think also, what helps is because early on, like there's a certain decision I made. I just chose not to engage in certain things. Like I was never really into the club that much. Like I love dancing, I love music, like I come from a musical family, but I never was big on like going to the club because just like the vibe to me just always felt really grimy to me. Um, there were certain environments that I just wasn't drawn to. And I think I think just, even being in high school, like I was so busy. I was involved in like everything, all kinds of extracurricular activities, working. Like, so I think honestly, just me staying really busy in high school, and then even in college, I was like going to school full time. I was working full time, and then I was super involved in like extracurricular activities. Like, I literally stayed so busy sometimes that it's like I didn't even really have time to go and try to, to go and explore and be like, okay, what would this mean? And so I think there's a mixture of things. On top of like my community, I ran with certain women who like we shared similar ideas. And again, I look back now and I'm like, okay, some of that was probably a little bit too religious, or a little bit too like to the far extreme there. But I think for the most part, when you hang around people who share your values, that they you can kind of keep they can kind of keep you accountable. And I think at the end of the day too, it's a personal conviction. It's a person saying, I don't want to live like how everyone else is living, because I don't see it bringing anyone life. I don't see it bringing anyone joy. And that's, like I said, that's something that I decided to do early on. So that's just me. Um, yeah, my sisters got married by 21 years old. I did grow up Muslim, so we emphasized traditional ideals. My sister didn't have body counts. Yeah, no, I've heard that. I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that. So I mean, and so like I said, yeah, everyone, and I understand we certainly live in a context now. Like I was reading an article yesterday, I think from New York Times, where they were talking about now there are platonic marriages. And so I mean, there is, I guess, certainly the option. It seems like there is this growing idea of people getting married to their friends. Maybe people getting married to, like I said, best friends or childhood neighbors or whatever. And they're not being a sexual exchange. They just marry because maybe they want the companionship, or they decide that they want to make decisions together, but just it not be romantic or sexual. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's possible to go and have a whole phase, and maybe you don't find a guy that you can love, but you marry your friend. I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. I don't know how many people or how many platonic marriages out there exist, how many sexless marriages exist, or how many people decide to marry their best friend just for the heck of it. I don't think that that's a big enough trend for that to be a default option. Um, but I think the primary, like I said, the primary thing that I will say is that a woman, especially a young girl needs to grow up and know, here is what is going to happen if you take this road. If you decide to live sexually pure, or if you do the more traditional route, here's what's going to happen. It might be a little bit easier for you when it comes to you picking a partner. Maybe easier for you to interact with a guy here, because you're not comparing him based upon all these things, right? And then it's like you can focus. You can actually focus more on getting yourself right, getting yourself together, focusing on the things that you like or that you love, because you're not always psychologically weighed down with all the baggage that comes from hopping in and out of a person's bed. And so I think taking that route, and that's the route that I took. I think there's a lot of drama, and certainly a lot of potential court cases and baby daddy situations that you avoid. That's for sure. Not to say there's not temptation, not to say that there's not, certain challenges that you have, but I think those challenges are not nearly as much as compared to somebody who takes the other route, right? Which is, yeah, you can go and you can have as much fun as you want, but know that the more fun you have, then the more risk associated with it. And that risk, it can just be STD, or it could be a pregnancy, and you can carry that child for a term. And if you carry the child for a term, then that's a responsibility you have for the rest of your life. Or if you don't carry that child for a term and maybe you choose to abort the child, that is guilt that you carry for the rest of your life. Or let's say that you choose to have the child and adopt the child. That is still a level of guilt that you hold for the rest of your life. So either way, if you take that route, there's likely going to be some form of repercussions. And if you decide to do that and you don't get pregnant, you don't get an STD, and you don't have a baby daddy or whatever, and you somehow you're psychologically okay, Now, what are the expectations that you are now bringing to a marriage? If you decide to marry, if you decide to get into a long-term relationship with a man, what are the expectations that you are bringing? And what have you learned throughout those years of hoeing and schooling? What have you learned about being a good wife, or what have you learned about being a good partner? And how has that activity prepared you to be in a long-term relationship? And I think that's where it becomes a challenge. And of course, again, if you choose to be like I chose to be celibate, or if you choose to just not do the whole like, okay, I'm gonna go and have sex with everything that walks, you just choose to be more moderate in your approach. Like I said, you still have to do work. I think you should still date. You should still meet with guys. You should still prepare yourself. Like literally prepare yourself if you want to be married. I'm talking hang out with women. Hang out with women that are in the position that you want to be. Hang out maybe with older women that have kids, have been successfully married for 20, 30, 40 years, right? Hang around people that have the kind of lifestyle that you want. So it's like you still have to prepare yourself. But I'm saying I think it's a lot easier to do that when you were literally not stuck in like this chaotic lifestyle. And you're not constantly driven by like your next sexual escapade. I think it's easy to do that when you have that freedom to operate versus when you are driven by sexual escapades, or when you are caught up in this kind of toxic cycle, which oftentimes happens, and you're not really given the freedom to explore some of those other intangible qualities that are actually needed in order for you to be a successful wife, or be a successful mother, or just be a good partner, period. So, and I think, let me see here, Charles say, what is asking to hear pro-black saying it is okay for women to have whole phrase? Yeah, I disagree. I disagree. Um, and that's why, I said this earlier. I was like, I will be the unpopular opinion on this, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay being the popular opinion because this is one area where I've never agreed, and I don't believe I'm better than anyone else. I'm not, and I don't believe, honestly, when I see women acting a certain way, I see women behaving a certain way, and it kind of saddens me. I'm like, wow, like you actually, I think you don't really see your worth or your value or who you could actually potentially be to a family, to a child. Like it to me, it saddens me because I feel like it cuts off a person's potential to fully be like a fully functioning woman adult because it invites so much drama. It invites sometimes so much, not only drama, but sometimes like life repercussions that completely derail or completely change the course of a person's life. And to someone's point earlier, there's a lot of social engineering. Yes, there is. And some of this stuff, some of these ideas, these bad tropes we're holding on to, they stem back to slavery, some of them, and it's like we've not even some of us like we've not even gotten out of it. When you see the way certain people act, it's just like, are you still a slave? Like, I mean, you're free, but are you? Like, the way you're acting, the way you are presenting yourself, like, what's going on? Like, where are you? Like, who are you? Do you even know? So, yeah, no, you're right. The social engineering goes deep, and unfortunately, you will have women, and you will have other black women literally being like, these men are dogs, these men are dusties, so therefore you need to act like a man. Like I actually heard that a few days ago. A woman who created a video that said, these men are effeminate and these men don't know how to be men. So therefore, ladies, you need to act like a man. And I'm like, what? Like you just said men are bad. So why are you gonna want to now act like something that's bad to you? Like that didn't make any sense. And there are entire groups of people who believe this. And this was said by a woman who was 48. This is a 48 women creating content saying men are horrible dusties. Men don't know how to be men anymore. So therefore, if you are a woman, you need to act like a man and have as much sex as possible. And I'm like, you're 48? That sounds like something an 18-year-old would say. It was ridiculous to me. It was actually ridiculous. So again, no, I don't agree. And yeah, you can call me pro black. Like I love black people. Like I love our culture. I love who we are. I love who God created us to be. Like our potential. Like just our history. Everything. Like there's so much. There's so many beautiful things about black culture that we don't necessarily see in mainstream. We have to seek it out ourselves. But I love us. I do. But even being that, like I love us, but I don't love us being Jezebels. I don't love us going around acting like hoes. because it's like the kind of behavior that is being promoted is is the behavior of what would have been considered a concubine, a couple 100,000 years ago, or even a couple hundred years ago. People had wives and concubines. There was a difference, even back in the day, in more traditional systems. They had wives who served a certain role, and they had concubines. And even then, they knew, okay, these women are different. Certain women are meant to be wives. Certain women are not meant to be wives. And I used to think all women have the potential of being a wife. I used to, um, I used to think that, and now I'm just like, I think I was misinformed. Honestly, like I think I was misinformed. I don't think every woman is meant to be a wife. To be honest, I think actually many are not prepared to do so, and that probably will be another podcast. But yeah, not all women are meant to be wives, and I think the fruit speaks for itself. We all we have to do is look at the behavior, because a wife ain't gonna go around and sleep with as many dudes as possible, and just kind of like, just have her body be a buffet, all you can eat, everybody can have it, and then try to present herself to a man and raise a family and try to raise kids to be productive when she's given all of herself to all these different dudes over all this time, and act like there's no repercussions. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And like I said, I'm not better than anybody. I'm not. I'm truly not. But I do get sad because I think women are told a lie. They're told that they can do whatever they want, and they can mistreat their bodies, and they're told that mistreating their bodies is actually loving their bodies. And I'm like, nah, I don't think that's true. All we got to do is look at the evidence. It's like, the psychological well-being of women are not. It's not doing too well. Families aren't really doing too well. You have a lot of women who want to be married who aren't married, but at least, and now they're marrying their friends. And is that what women truly, truly, truly want deep down in their heart? Or are women still, many of us still meant to be communitarian, and we love families and we value our relationships? And at the core, even with this whole single, independent, I don't need a man, I don't need nobody culture, at the end of the day, do we still have women who deep down inside just want to be married and just want to have a family? I think you still have that, but many are scared to say that. And many are scared to say, man, I messed up, or I'm doing something that's not working for me. Many are scared to say it. And I'm here to say, look, if I'm the unpopular opinion here, I'm okay with that. I will gladly be the unpopular opinion. Because, like I said, I don't want the popular result. I do not want the popular result. So, anyways, I know it's like actually getting even more late out here. I'm out on the West Coast. It's almost about to hit midnight. But I just wanted to talk about this. This has really been on my heart. I want to thank everybody who was tuned in. Like I said, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please share, comment. You can find me on my Cash App, ChezCharde, also on Venmo. Feel free to just share your love and support. And as always, if you have any questions or just any content ideas you'd like me to cover off, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And most of all, I just thank you guys for listening in. I know you could literally be anywhere tonight, like sleeping in your bed. You could literally be asleep, but you guys have been listening to me ranting and raving, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for everyone who has just been on, who's been sharing their comments, tagging people. I really appreciate it. And we're definitely going to be having some more of these conversations. So thank you again, and we will talk later. Have a good night.